officially summer, Rube.
It's not officially summer.
For us, it is.
I mean, but it's not officially summer.
Officially, for the NFL folks, it's summer.
Whatever you say.
You're a big calendar guy. You like the calendar?
Big calendar guy. Yeah.
Live your life by those boxes in a book.
I know. You can name a date in the future, and I can tell you what day of the week it is.
Is that right?
Yeah. Tuesday.
You can't do this, can you?
I have a 14% chance of being right.
Okay. I thought you were like a savant for a second.
No.
Okay. That's a good way to start this podcast.
Just a good liar.
This is Eagle Eye. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. It's the off season, kind of. We're waiting now for training camp, which will begin on July 25th. That's when players report. So we got a long time between now and then because the Eagles didn't have a mandatory mini camp. A lot of time to fill. We will have podcasts throughout this kind of dead period. We're going to one a week, though, in the summer. So sorry to say that for some of you guys who like to listen twice a week, but we have nothing to talk about. So
but if there's news, we will.
Sure. Yeah. If something happens, like, they sign someone to an extension, they make a trade, something like that.
We're on it.
Yeah. We'll give you an extra pod. Happy to do that. But yeah, we're also going to take some vacation, but we have pods planned out. You'll get a pod each week. We're happy to do that. We want to give you something during this period.
Yeah. We don't want you to be the pod man out. You just wish you thought.
Yeah, I don't hate that, actually. Last week, we talked a little bit on Thursday after the last OTA practice. We went through some observations. We mentioned a little bit of what Nick Sirianni said, but we also talked to Jalen Hurts for the first time since, I guess, his contract.
Yeah.
So it was good to talk to him about non-Jalen Hurts things because he doesn't really want to talk about himself that often. But we got some things out of him. And I thought the most kind of unique thing and thing that I took away from his chat on Thursday was him talking about getting better and like his process for growth.
Yeah. And it's really, gosh, there's not many things he likes to talk about. That's one of the few, and he'll talk about it forever. That's really the essence of his being, is getting better and focusing on the process and devoting each minute of each day to finding a way to get better. And he won't talk about the result. He won't talk about anything that happens along the way, but he will talk about his process as far as getting better. And as good as he was, there's certainly still room for that. I don't know if we'll see the leaps and bounds I
don't know if there's enough room to take a leap like last year.
No, there probably isn't. But I mean, I like that. I think the best guys, their whole career, no matter whether they're 38 or 24, are still trying to get better. If you're not, you're going backwards. So it was interesting to hear him talk about it. Yeah,
the shame of it is, like, I always find this kind of unfair in professional sports that by the time you're smart enough and you can win with your mind, your body is already going. In football, especially, like, you hear Kelsey talk about, I'm a lot smarter now. I wish I would have known this stuff. There's no way. It doesn't. Sometimes it'll line up in the middle, and there's this peak with some like great players. But for the most part, like, you're smartest at the end when your body doesn't work as well anymore.
And the longer that period of overlap, better the player you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Jalen's pretty smart. And I think he's getting smarter. And I think that's like the one area where there's going to be natural progression, even if he didn't work at it as hard as he does, just being in this offense for another year. I think that, like, last year was his second year in this offense. So we made a big deal about that because it was the first time he had that really since he's been a high level player.
Yeah.
But getting a third year in that offense, even with the offensive coordinator change, still the same offense, it's really valuable. And you don't like stop learning nuance of an offense because it kind of becomes like it merges with what he is as a player.
Yeah. And I think it's not just learning the offense, but also, the longer he's in this offense, the more Nick can kind of give him, and the more they trust him. I mean, they trust him, but the longer you're in it, the more you can do, and the more you understand the answers, and that doesn't stop. I mean, and that just that mental understanding will lead to better physical play. That's a long process, and it takes years for most quarterbacks to get there. I really look at him as a guy who's just kind of starting his journey, and there's going to be at some point there'll be a regression probably. He might have I don't want to say an off year, but might have a year that statistically isn't like the previous one, and a lot goes into it, the people around you and injuries and who you're playing. But I just expect that climb to just be continuous as long as he's in the league.
Yeah, and you're right about like last year we saw just this giant leap. There probably isn't room for a leap like that, but as long as he can keep getting better, and sometimes like the stats aren't always indicative of the player either. I think we have to remember that, especially as the Eagles come back from this crazy year where they were the best team in the league, and the numbers were insane. Like some of the numbers for there's a good chance a player could have as good a season and the numbers won't be there just for other factors, but I expect him to keep getting better. And one of the fascinating parts of what he said on Thursday, he was talking about like how he learns the areas he needs to improve. Because like some guys, I think it is very personal. It's like they want to watch the tape, they want to pinpoint it, they want to come up with a plan, and they'll listen to the coaches. They have no choice because they have an exit interview, and the coaches say, "Hey, here are the areas we think you can get better. We want you to work on this." But Jalen like actively seeks out other people's opinions, which I think is kind of cool. He mentioned Darius Slay, Nick Sirianni, and Jonathan Gannon even.
That was interesting.
Yeah, who was here, maybe not after the season, that he might have been gone too quick to get JG's thoughts, but I'd like that Jalen's willing to kind of crowdsource it a little bit.
Maybe when the Cards called Gannon, there was a three-way Zoom call. Yeah, and I've never heard a quarterback talk about kind of bouncing ideas off the defensive coordinator. I guess it's done. I guess that makes sense. He's the guy who's going up against him in practice all the time. But for Jalen, getting better is an obsession, and so he'll use any resource available to him, whether it's the chef or the ticket manager or anybody. If he thinks there's something there that can help him, he will use that resource. I imagine he calls players and other quarterbacks, and it's really all he cares about is getting better. And I think that really, look, it makes him better, but I think it really sets the tone for the whole franchise.
Yeah, you can't do it if you're not humble.
Yeah,
you need some humility to ask other people where, like, if I said, "Hey, read all my writing and tell me where you think I'm not as good," like there's a level of humility there that I don't have.
I do have a list actually.
Yeah, no, but it does take that, and you have to be willing to listen to it and realize it comes from a good place. And I think that's like the accountability aspect of Nick's, the 5 core values, which I don't want to parrot because I kind of, my eyes roll a little bit every time he says it, but I think that is a really important one. And from what I gather, this team does it better than a lot of teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you need leaders like Jalen Hurts who are willing to listen to it and to be accountable. And I like that. This is like next level though. Like when you're actively trying to find out where you think other people find your weaknesses.
Yeah. And it's one thing to be like a rookie who struggled, or, a second-year player who was adequate and exciting at times. But to be where he is, a Super Bowl quarterback, MVP runner-up, Pro Bowler, set a bunch of records, had a historic Super Bowl, to be that player and still be having the exact same mentality. Yeah. His mentality doesn't change at all from last year to this year. And he could be a Hall of Famer. I mean, he could be where Patrick Mahomes is, and I assume a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Brady or Aaron Rodgers, I assume they have the same mentality of always trying to get better. And and really honing in those things that can make them. Maybe not Aaron Rodgers. He might think he's got it all figured out.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Maybe at this point.
I think the Aaron Rodgers stuff has gone so much the other way that I don't think he's a bad dude. I think he's a weirdo.
No, I don't think he's a bad dude. I'm definitely Team Rodgers over Team Favre, if that was the question. But
well, yeah.
But I just wonder.
I don't know if there's many Team Favre people still hanging around.
Probably true.
Yeah.
How about Team Bart Starr? 5 championships. He's got twice as many as Favre and Rodgers combined. But anyway, enough Packers talk. Yeah, but I think you can't even measure the effect that Jalen's obsession with improvement has on his teammates, his coaches, everybody in that building.
Yeah.
It really sets the tone for every day in the NovaCare.
Yeah, and I think it's calculated to some extent. Like, I think it is who he is as a person, but he also realizes that his teammates are watching. And he talked about that a little bit. He said him and A.J. Brown chatted about it recently. And so he brought up that anecdote for us that he was asked about, Nick said he's the most coachable player he's ever been around. And that's an active choice because he knows that if he's willing to listen to it and to not talk back to coaches, then his teammates will be. Because I think that's almost like a natural instinct. Like, you're trying. No one's like actively trying to be bad, and you're trying to do things better, and you're going to mess up. And you have to be willing to say, yeah, I messed up and I got to get better at it, instead of being, defensive, which I think comes naturally to some people.
Do you want to go over some areas where you think Jalen could get better?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you? I know you have a list in front of you, so why don't we run through that?
Yeah, I mean, I started off just with accuracy, and he made huge strides. He was 66% last year, but he's still not in the top 10. That put him what? Well, put him 11th, which is really good. But he's gotten more accurate each year. 66. The league average 64. There were 8 quarterbacks at 67 or higher. I think that'd be a good place for him. And
that was really like the biggest question when we look back at his rookie season, 52%, which was, I think, a little misleading.
Yeah.
Because
who was he thrown to?
Yeah. And situationally, it wasn't great. But like he needed to improve, and he did it in 2021, and he did it again in 2022 to go from 52%, 61.3 in year 2, 66.5 in year 3. Those are good jumps. And the thing I like about Jalen is a lot of his misses are aggressive misses that I'm okay with. Like he really started to trust A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith this year to try to make catches. And a lot of times those guys made it work, and they paid it off. But there are other times where, pass fell incomplete, but like, I'm okay with the attempt.
Yeah.
So the percentage is like overall, like it's a general way to generalize it, and we can see trends. But like, I think if you break it down further, there were misses that I'm okay with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Productive misses.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I put down was fumbles. He's still fumbling too much. Interceptions are way down. Just had 6 all year. 9 fumbles ranked him 5th in the league behind Justin Fields, Matt Ryan, Josh Allen, and Trevor Lawrence. And then obviously a really damaging one in the Super Bowl.
Which was just a weird one.
Weird play. And
really, I don't even know how you get better from that one.
Yeah, it was just he just dropped the ball, which can happen. Maybe it was the Fields' fault. So, and that's I think part of that is a product of the way he plays, and it's kind of related to another one on here, which is time in the pocket. He's like near the bottom as far as holding the ball in the pocket, but that's how he plays. He's running around trying to make a play. So you don't want to say just drop back every time and throw the ball, because that's not who he is. But it's also something I think he can get better at, because he does kind of get himself into some trouble sometimes by doing it.
Sometimes he has a good line too. So like, there's normally a clean pocket.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is like, sometimes a lot of fumbles happen in the pocket. You're standing in the pocket. You're double patting the ball. That's where strip sacks come.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's like guaranteed if he stays in the pocket and delivers, because he's gotten better again. Like when he's in the pocket, I think he gets the ball out pretty quick.
Yeah. Not always. Sometimes. Yeah.
Normally, like when the long plays come when he extends, when he flees the pocket.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes he doesn't seem to be aware of blindside rush. Well, that's probably every quarterback, but it's something he could get a little better at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of related to another one, which is he took 38 sacks last year, which is 7th most in the league. And I think that's kind of a product of the way he plays, a product of trying to make something out of every play that's broken down. Would like to see him throw the ball away. I think he got better at it. I'd like to see him throw the ball away a little more in some of those instead of taking 8 yards.
Yeah, that was significantly higher. He had 26 and 21 in the same amount of games.
And behind that O-line, 38 sacks that's too many. Because that O-line is not a 38 sack O-line.
Yeah, there were some that were on him for sure.
Yeah. What else did I have on here? Well, just running less, and we've talked about this. He's a unique player, and he can certainly make plays on the run. But I thought there were games where it was too much. I just like to see a little bit better judgment when to take off and when to. If you have a guy open, especially now that like there's some answers underneath with Swift and if Goddard's healthy and there's going to be some answers you can get 7-8 yards if you can do that, throwing the ball, dumping it off instead of putting yourself at risk out in the open. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Look, I always think it's going to be like you're always trying to walk that line with him because, like, if he's forced to be a pocket passer, I think it takes away what makes him special.
Sure.
Not that he can't become just a special player in the pocket because he's on that trajectory, but right now, like, you don't want to take away that ability. I mean, he rushed for over 700 yards and 13 touchdowns last year. That's a major weapon. But you're right. I guess there are some times though where you're like, is that 5-yard run worth it?
Yeah, exactly.
The risk of injury.
I mean, when you start looking at the game book after the game, you see 17 carries.
Yeah.
And I know it's just a number. Some of them are kneel downs, and you kind of take them into it.
And even the QB sneaks, like,
yeah,
I don't think those plays are as dangerous as ones in the open field.
No, I don't either. They're kind of fun. The only other thing I put down was late season interceptions. His interception numbers are great, but he does seem to throw a lot late in the season, December.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is he hasn't played a lot of games in December.
I mean, he had that 3 interception game against the Giants 2 years ago. He had 2 against the Bears this past year. He had 1 against the Giants on the last day of the season. I don't know if it's the conditions. Well, the Bears game, he was kind of hurt. But it's just something to keep an eye on. Yeah, overall, I mean, his interception numbers are incredible. But he does seem to have a little weakness for him late in the season.
Yeah. I think, and he got so much better at it this year, was like throwing with anticipation, like, not waiting for the open guy. But I still think there's more room there.
Yeah.
To get better. Like he showed great strides with that this year, really trusting his players. Thinking like those back shoulder balls to AJ or like slot fades to Devontae, like those were growth throws for Jalen. As silly as it is, like slants to AJ before he crosses his face are good throws that I don't know how many he makes a couple years ago when he's not throwing AJ Brown. So I think like having those better players has unlocked Jalen a little bit more and makes him feel comfortable making those throws. But I still think there's a little bit of room for growth.
Yeah. Like last year, he had 3 picks going into the Chicago game when he got hurt, and he had 3 the last 2 games. So just one of those quirky things. But it's kind of nitpicking, and a lot of these things are, they look like negatives, but they're just a product of a really unique style of play. That's really effective and really dangerous. And like you said, you don't want to take away what makes him so dangerous and what makes him so effective. And
even the things he's good at, he can get better in. And I that's his point too. Like his decision making last year was so good. He just constantly made the right decisions, but I bet you even he would tell you, like, there were moments where he didn't, and he wants to eliminate all of them.
Yeah.
Which is good. You want that.
Yep.
All right. On this theme of improvement, we have a list of guys we think might improve this year, and then after the break, we'll get into some players who we think have the chance to decline, and it's a little bit of a worry entering this year. So we'll start with the guys we think can improve. We'll ping pong this one back and forth. I'll give you first dibs.
Yeah, I'll start with Jordan Mailata, and part of it was the shoulder injury. I just felt like I felt like he could be an all-pro if he could find the consistency in his game that might be a little lacking right now. He's really good. When he's healthy, he's really, really good. I think there's more there. I think there's a consistency he hasn't quite discovered yet. That if look, he's still a young guy, and I just think if it's there, I think he'll be a Pro Bowler for years, but he's not quite there yet. And I think as long as he's with Stoutland and he certainly puts in the work, he has a chance to get there.
I think you're right. It's weird with him, and I asked him this when we talked to him in the spring. For the first few years of his career, he was just getting better by leaps and bounds, and obviously, like, that trajectory wasn't going to continue. But now I'm really curious to see, like, what is his ceiling at this point? Is he going to kind of taper off, and is he going to be an above average offensive tackle? Which, hey, that's fine. Like, there are bad tackles in this league. He's a pretty good one already. I'd say he's I think he's like a top 10 left tackle right now, but he has the potential to be like an all pro.
Yeah.
And is he going to reach that level? I don't know. There are no guarantees, but I still think he has that talent level.
Yeah. And I would almost say last year was disappointing for him just because that progression didn't continue,
Mm-hmm.
the leaps and bounds you talked about. I'm just looking with PFF where they had him last year. Not that that's really tell all. Overall grade. He's pretty high, so he is ninth overall. I'm not going to go through right and left tackles, but it's pretty good.
He's a good player.
That's pretty good, and he's looks like he's 10th run blocking and a little bit lower pass blocking.
There are still levels to climb.
Yeah, so they have him. He's in the 30s pass blocking, in the top 10 run blocking. But I mean, physically, he's got all the tools to make it happen. He's got the desire to make it happen. I think he's one guy that's really inspired by Jalen. He talks about Jalen all the time, and just how seeing him in the weight room, seeing him in the meeting room, on the practice field, how it drives him and pushes him. He wants to match Jalen's work ethic and his desire and his hunger, and it's a pretty good guy to model yourself after.
Yeah, it's not bad. I have another Jordan for you, Jordan Davis. I think fair to say a disappointing rookie season. Not all because of not all on him. It wasn't all his fault. He got the injury, but he certainly wasn't the impact player the Eagles hoped they were going to get when they traded up to take him. I still think he can be that, and he might take years to become the pass rusher like that we saw when the upside that they hoped they were getting, but he can be the run stuffer this year. And I think he was starting to do that last year early on in the season before the injury. And they're expecting big things out of him. There's no more Linval Joseph. He's got to be the starting nose tackle. He's going to play an awful lot. They need him to play well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if I'd use the word disappointing.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it was his fault. But the injury happened and he missed games.
If he played at the level he was at before he got hurt for the whole year.
No, I think he was starting to ascend. So I was seeing the trajectory you'd want to see, and we never got to see the payoff of it because the injury happened at the worst possible time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I'm not sure I'd say disappointing.
What would you say? How could it not be disappointing?
I guess
this
it
is
depends
not a
on your
knock on him.
expectations. I mean,
Yeah, it was the 13th overall pick.
okay. Yeah, all right. That's fair.
He started 5 games, and then a guy off the street was playing better than him until the end of the year. Like I'm still really bullish on Jordan Davis, which is why I have him in my category.
I thought Jordan played
to
better than
improve.
Linval Joseph for the season. But I mean, look, that's irrelevant.
I don't know if that's true.
I liked what I saw. I thought he was on his way. I guess it's semantics. I mean, does an injury make it a disappointing year? I mean, it was disappointing he got hurt. I like what I saw. I think he's going to be fine. I think having Jalen Carter.
To be very clear, I do too. I have him in the improve category here.
Sure,
I think he's going to improve a lot this year.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. Yeah, maybe we just disagree a little bit on where he was last year, but yeah, they certainly need him. They need him to be a lot better than he was. That's certainly fair. But year 2, you would expect that, and he seems like a guy who's willing to put in the work. And we'll see. It's a big year for him, and I think having Jalen Carter next to him is going to help both of them. But I think it'll really help Jordan.
Yeah. All right. How about you have another one for improve?
I have Kenny Gainwell, and we saw some blips late in the season, and in the Giants playoff game, more than a blip, he was really good. It's tough to say. We don't know how he's going to be used. We don't know what that rotation is going to look like, but I think he's going to be a fairly significant part of it, however it plays out. And I think the high points we saw from Kenny Gainwell last year kind of make you feel like if he could be that player consistently through the year, you have something. So he's still a really young guy. He hasn't played that much. He's a projection in a lot of ways. But when he's good, he's really, really good. So I'm curious about the whole running back rotation, how it's going to – I don't think they know how it's going to play out. I think it might be a week-to-week decision. But I'm kind of bullish on Gainwell. I think he's got a lot of ability. And he's a good receiver, which I think they'll use him a lot there. And we'll see how it goes. But I think he has a chance to be a pretty significant piece of this offense.
I think it's fair. He's a fascinating guy because he really, you can argue his regular season was a little disappointing. Sorry to use that word again, but you looked at his year-over-year stats and you think, okay, I mean, it was different because Miles played really well last year. He's a Pro Bowler. He was getting all these snaps, and it might have just been an opportunity thing. But I think the way we look at Gainwell right now is so much different because of the playoff game against the Giants and the playoff game against the 49ers. Those 2 games have completely shifted a lot of our thoughts on Kenny Gainwell, which is fine. Those were playoff games and he played really well. It's just interesting to me that if those games didn't happen, I think we're talking about him very differently right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But to do it on that stage kind of shows you what's possible. I mean, he only had 53 carries all year. Yeah. He only had 20 up until week 14. So, I mean, he was really – but even on the few carries he got, you could see there was something there. And he had some catches. But, yeah, 12 for 112 and a touchdown in that Giants game is pretty impressive. I had a stat in my 10 observations this week, and there are 4 Super Bowls, 80, 04, 17, and 22. The Eagles have only had one running back with 10 or more carries average over 3 yards per carry in a Super Bowl. And that was LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah.
They've never gotten –
Kenny's Super Bowl wasn't – we cut about playoff Kenny. He didn't have a good game in Super Bowl.
He did not. They couldn't run the ball.
They couldn't.
Real surprising to me. Chiefs did a good job. Their linebackers were really quick. But that's a good one.
My next one might sound strange to have him in this category. Devontae Smith. I think there are more levels here, and we're starting to see a superstar player.
I agree with that. And I think the difference between first half of the year, Devontae, and second half tells you that.
Mm-hmm.
Second half of the year, he was one of the best receivers in the league.
Yeah, and he's super clutch. So last year he had 95 catches for just on, what do you have, 1,196 yards and 7 touchdowns. So like the numbers are already really good.
Yeah.
I think he's going to keep getting better as a player, though. I think, we're talking about him as like a top 10, borderline top 10 guy. I think he has top 5 potential.
I do as well. And I think you touched on something. He makes so many big clutch catches. He's not afraid of the moment. He had 100-yard Super
Never
Bowl.
was. He's going back to Alabama.
It's true. He had a 100-yard Super Bowl as a 24-year-old. To have 1,200 yards, and then the last 8 weeks of the season, he was the 4th leading receiver in the league. AJ was first.
Yeah.
And the Eagles became only the 2nd team ever with 2 receivers with 700 or more yards the last 8 weeks of the season. And the Devontae we saw from like week 8, week 9 on is one of the best receivers in the league. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, so clutch. And I think one thing about Devontae is like he doesn't get a ton of easy catches. Like he works for everything he gets, leaping in traffic, sideline grabs, and he catches them. He catches them all. He makes catches that you just can't believe sometimes. Really reminds me of Mike Quick.
I look back at the pre-draft process and people questioning if he was big enough to play in the league. And you're like, watch him play. He's so tough. Like he played through that elbow injury his rookie year, which tells you all you need to know about his toughness. And then like the way he does not play like a super skinny guy. And this year in the spring, he was looking a little buffer to me. He's been working out.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more his frame can take.
Get all
Yeah, I don't know how much more his frame can take, but
yeah,
it looks like he's putting in that work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's a Pro Bowler this year. But I mean, NFC, it's so hard. There's so many good receivers, but wouldn't be at all surprised if he's a 1,400-yard guy this year. Yeah. But there's only one ball. You have Goddard and AJ Brown. Maybe they just won't throw to anyone else.
Hey, not a bad strategy. Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in the great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, Rube. Now we're going to get to the negativity here a little bit. Guys who we think might decline. And this is not that we expect them to decline, but there's a fear that if they do, it wouldn't be all that surprising and it would hurt the team significantly. So we'll do the same thing. We'll ping pong it back and forth. I'll let you go first.
I'll start with Slay. And I'm not convinced that what we saw the second half is who he is now, but there is a fear. And he wasn't bad. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't as good as he was the first half of the year. And quarterbacks, and there's something that you see, like quarterbacks, like some players lose it gradually. Some positions you lose it. Cornerbacks go from being all pros to being out of the league in 2 years, just because when you lose a step, you go from being a really, really good cornerback to you can't cover guys. It doesn't take much. I mean, the difference between losing that step and not losing it is everything. And I worry about Slay. I just thought he just didn't look the same the second half. Maybe there was an injury, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I certainly I'm glad he's back. Still think he's a good player, but I worry that he will take a step backwards this year. Was he 30? He'll be 33 in January. So he'll be 32 for most of the regular season. Not a lot of cornerbacks that age, and certainly not a lot of teams have 2 in their 30s. There's only a few. So maybe he'll prove me wrong. He certainly had a really good first half of the year. But I am concerned.
Yeah, and look, they're going to play a lot of really good receivers this year. Yeah. So he's warming up his hamstrings as we speak, getting ready for a gauntlet. And even if he hadn't shown a little bit of those signs last year, you'd still probably have him on this list just because he's a 32-year-old cornerback.
Yeah, it's true.
My first one is Fletcher Cox, who at 31, 32 last year had quite a bounce-back season, had 7 sacks, played really well, started every game, played a lot. But like, how long is this sustainable for a guy who is 32 now, who has played so much football and they're still really relying on him. Even after they drafted Jalen Carter, I mean, Fletcher's still a starter. He's still going to play a ton. They're relying on him this year, and at a cheaper salary, which makes you feel better. But if he doesn't play well, then it doesn't really matter. They need him to still be the player he was last year, and I don't know if that's guaranteed he will be.
Certainly not guaranteed. I actually have a piece on Fletcher that's up this morning on our site, our beautifully redesigned site, which they did a really nice job on. Fletcher's an interesting one. I really like your theory. I actually mentioned it in my story about how superstar players, like we don't let them just be good. It's like once they're not a superstar anymore, it's like, all right, he sucks. Well, Fletcher doesn't. He didn't last year. He's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
By any metric. Played the most snaps out of all the interior linemen. One more than Hargrave. But but that was last year. And he he's 32 and like Slay, and
he's played so much football.
At some point, he is going to drop off.
He's played 173 games, and he plays a ton in every game.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably, for his career, he's probably averaged 55 snaps a game. I can actually figure that out.
Even with their rotation, he's played a ton of football.
I don't think they even kept track of snaps when his career began. No, they did. We have. All right, how many games has he played?
173.
So he's averaged 50 snaps a game in his career.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, he's played.
And in, probably the last 5 years, that's more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's been over 700 every year except 17 when he didn't play the last couple games. He's an interesting one because at some point that decline is going to happen. It's just a matter of, and look, we already saw from 20 to 21. I mean, he was not good in 2021, but kind of regrouped.
Yeah.
Bounced back.
And it's been a slope down since 18, which was his best year. Hey, which is fine. Like, he's not going to be an all-pro through his 30s. Like, that's through his 30s. That's not going to happen. They just need him to hold up for this year because he's a really important piece.
Yep.
How about your next one?
I feel bad about this, and I know he's going to kill me, but BG, I love you. You're one of my favorite guys ever. But, I mean, BG's 35 now and turned 35 last month, I think, or in April.
In April. He is a few days older than me.
Okay.
So we got to keep him and Kelsey around. Just when they leave, I'll be a little sad.
Well, for lots of reasons. He was so good last year, but to think that he could have another double-digit sack season at 35, I think the one good thing is that they have some depth there, and they certainly have a lot of bodies, and he's not going to be asked to do a ton like he wasn't last year. I think that'll help him. He might have had the most sacks and the fewest reps. I think there was one guy who had more sacks on fewer snaps last year, but look, he's going into his 13th year, 14th year.
14th. Kelsey's in 13.
Crazy. It's crazy. If you told me in 2012 that Fletcher, Kelsey, and BG would still be here and that I'd still be doing this.
Heck, in 2013, you had Lane in the mix. 4 guys over 10 years now.
Yeah. And they're the only team that has that. In the age of free agency, I mean, that's just so rare. I don't know the last team that did have that. Not just 10-year guys, but 10-year guys have never played anywhere else. It's really something. But BG's a guy you're concerned about, and I know he'll do everything he can to maximize what he has left. I don't think he even thought he'd be playing this long. I think the original plan was he would rehab. He'd play last year, and then he'd retire and get a job in the front office, helping out Howie and Connor Barwin and those guys. And he kind of messed up that plan by getting a career-high 11 sacks.
He's always said he wants to play 15 years. So,
well, he's getting close to that.
Yeah. It would be cool to see him go out on his terms.
Yeah.
Play well through 15 years and then walk away.
4th in the comeback player of the year voting last year.
Yeah. Gino had to win that because he came back from being bad.
Yeah, I think they need to do a better job explaining exactly what that award is for.
It was so weird. I don't understand why Gino won that.
Yeah. What did he come back from?
Being a disappointment.
I think it's coming back. It should be coming back from an injury or some sort of hardship or adversity.
Yeah.
Being out of the league, getting cut. I don't know, injury. But anyway.
Yeah, it was weird to me.
Sorry, BG, but I do love you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not even about like we think necessarily they're going to decline, but it's like there's a chance they decline and it would be bad for the team.
Yeah.
And he fits that bill. I'll give you another one, James Bradbury.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the same reasons as Slay, just older corners scare you. And he's going to be 30 when this year begins. And I think he played better last year than anyone really expected. Not that he didn't have that in him, but they got much higher production and productivity out of Bradbury than they're probably anticipating when they signed him that 1 year deal. It probably wasn't his best season in the league, but it was close. And you have a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player now 30. Yeah, it worries you a little bit.
Yeah. And he's not in a contract year. Like he played last year on a contract year. And I don't know if he's the kind of guy that's going to intentionally play harder. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but I think there's a subconscious factor there. When you're on a contract year, you're just a different guy than when you sign a longer term deal.
Yeah, and he played so well last year. I'll tell you what, a lot of the teams around the league were thinking Bradbury can't run anymore, and I thought he did a good job of playing well, and he showed he could run a little bit, but in the back of your mind, he's never been Slay speedy anyway.
Right.
If he loses a step, it could be trouble.
It's fair.
All right, this is from our producer, Ben. Give us a definition of the comeback player. Refers to a number of awards that are given to a player who has shown perseverance in overcoming adversity in the form of not being in the NFL the previous year, a severe injury, or simply poor performance. Okay, so.
All right.
Poor performance. I think that's silly, though.
Appreciate it, Ben, but we still don't like it.
Yeah. All right. I think those are fair answers there.
Yeah.
For decline. The last thing we had on our little docket here, Miles Sanders. What'd you make of his comments? First, tell us what he said, and what'd you make of it?
Yeah. I should have the story up here, but I don't. So Miles talked to a reporter down in Carolina. It's really the first time he's addressed the Super Bowl in his role. What was he, 7 for 16?
Outsnapped by Kenny Gainwell.
Outsnapped by Kenny Gainwell, 38-26, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote that.
Yeah.
And it was weird because, like, after the Super Bowl, like, did he talk in the locker room? Do you remember? I was outside the stadium. I don't think he did. Or if he did, he didn't say anything.
I don't remember. So we were split up in there. I remember he had his hand wrapped.
Right.
But I don't remember if he spoke. I think he did. But
well, it was just weird because there were so many other storylines that Miles wasn't really. And then he wasn't in a locker clean out day. I remember that.
Poked his head in, I believe.
Did he?
Yeah.
I don't even know if we had a chance to ask Nick about him, but it was just weird because, I mean, he had such a good year. He was 5th in the league in rushing, almost 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4.9 yards a carry, Pro Bowl, had like a really, really good year. And then they just kind of like Gainwell.
Yeah, I don't think Miles was healthy at the end of the year. I don't know. I have nothing to back that. He didn't look like the same guy.
He didn't. He really didn't. And you could tell. I remember asking Nick the Friday or whatever the last availability was. Was it Friday or Thursday? I think it was Friday about that. And he just said, oh, well, we've always liked Kenny on third down. But it was more than that. And they wanted to get Kenny going in the Super Bowl more than they wanted to get Miles going. He fumbled on the first play, fumbled out of bounds. So they kept the ball. But then he didn't have any more carries until – I think he had one more carry till the middle of the third quarter after that. It was really strange. And then they didn't make any attempt to re-sign him, which wasn't surprising. Just
looking at the deal he got.
Yeah, and that's just Howie in analytics. He's just not going to sign a running back with that much mileage. But he finally talked about it this past week, and what he said to the reporter. Who's a reporter? Put his name in, but from AP. Last game of the season for all the marbles. Everybody can answer that question. If they put themselves in my shoes, would they be happy? I don't want to make headlines, but if it does, I don't care.
Look, I get it. They also scored 35 points in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I kind of get where Nick was coming from. I mean, Miles just he wasn't effective in that game. He wasn't effective late in the year. Whatever juice he had early, and I don't know if it was an injury, he was just worn down. I mean, they have a ton of carries. I mean, they did a good job of, it's not like he had a bunch of 22 carry games. But there was a point, he had 144 yards against the Giants. And then the last 4 games of the CM, he was bad against the Bears. He was bad against Dallas, 21 for 65. Against New Orleans, 12 for 61 is pretty good. 11 for 33 in the last regular season game. He was good against the Giants, 17 for 90. But then 11 for 42 against the Niners. They didn't run the ball. It was just weird. And he averaged like close to 6 yards a carry up through that first Giants game. And then he was at like 3.8 the rest of the year, the last 7 games. Something was different. Something changed. They sensed it, and they liked what Gainwell was giving them as a runner and a receiver. He's a better receiver than Miles, and he showed some juice running the ball.
Yeah.
And as a coach, you can't worry about Pro Bowls or how many yards a guy had during a regular season or anything like that. You just got to go with the guy you think is going to give you the best chance to win, and he did.
If you gave Howie Roseman some truth serum and you asked him, what do you think about taking Miles Sanders with the 53rd overall pick when you did? What do you think he makes of that pick right now?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Because they got some good use out of Miles. They got to a Super Bowl with him, but he's no longer here because they didn't want to re-sign him. And I don't know if he ever became the player they hoped he would become.
Yeah. I think if he had 4 years like he had this past year, or 3 or close to it, then, but I mean, those first 3 years, he's hurt so much. And when you take a guy at 53, you want to at least want to re-sign him. If you can't, you can if you get outbid somewhere, but they didn't even want to. I think it was pretty clear, even coming into the season, that he wasn't going to be back. He really wanted to be back. I mean, he tweeted all the time how much he wanted to be back, and then they were just like, bye. But that's a good question. I would say he probably would have got the pick.
Yeah. It's a weird one. And I think,
especially because he didn't take a Georgia guy there.
And I also think it probably makes him feel a little more emboldened about his strategy with running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the time I took one high in the draft, it didn't really work out the way we had hoped. And Miles was a good player. I don't want to make it seem like he wasn't a good player. He was. He gave them a few good years, and especially last year, he was a really big piece to them getting number 1 seed and going as far as they did. But I think if you were to really ask Howie with some truth serum, he'd say, I don't think it was worth the asset.
It's a really interesting question. I mean, he's a top 10 running back in Eagles history.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure what that really means. How would you rank him? Do you mind? Can I take a stab at this?
All-time rankings?
Yeah.
I am not prepared for this.
I'm not either, but I'd go Shady. I think Shady, Westbrook, and Van Buren would be the top 3.
Okay.
And Wilbert's
ahead of him.
And then probably Deuce, who's his current position coach. Deuce had 3,000-yard seasons.
Deuce definitely ahead of him?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so, yeah. And a lot of catches. He had a ton of catches. Yeah. Timmy Brown probably ahead of him. Ricky Waters,
Probably, right?
Probably ahead of him. And then Miles, probably 7th. And there's nobody else. I mean, Keith Byers wouldn't be ahead of him.
Yeah, Ricky Waters had 2 Pro Bowl years.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a workhorse.
In 3 years, he was over. Yeah, that was an impressive 3-year stretch.
Yeah, it really was. He had more yards in 3 years than Miles had in 4.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah. Well, no, by about 80.
Yeah?
I think Ricky had about 3,800. Miles had about 3,720.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think something like that. Miles is really good. I mean, Miles is one of only 5 backs in history.
Ricky also caught the ball really well.
Great receiver. He was so underrated.
Yeah.
Big fan. Probably should not have said for who for what, but he overcame it. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else he would put in that top 10. Not Byers, not Corrupt Buckhalter, Charlie Garner.
Where do you think Wendell
Sproles.
ranks?
Wendell Smallwood?
Yeah.
He'd be probably in the top 50.
Okay.
Got a Super Bowl ring.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. We good here?
Yeah.
All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye Podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's it. We'll have pods for you throughout the summer. Do not fear. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.